Welcome back this afternoon to the Montana Agricultural Experiment Station, Montana State University Virtual Field Days. Thanks for the public for joining us on the YouTube Live. We have another section of individuals to answer your questions this afternoon from 2 to 3 o'clock. I want to take just a second before we start our interviews and thank Mike Suarez from Montana PBS, who really makes this process work. He's been behind the scenes all day long. He's been an editor of all the 56 or 60 some videos we have online for the educational purposes. And he's really put a lot of work and effort into making this happen for the Montana Ag Experiment Station. So thank you very much to Montana PBS and Mike Suarez. Other two people is Sharon Henderson. Sharon Henderson, the admin for the Department of Research Center. She's gone above and beyond making this happen. I get to be the pretty face in front of the camera, but she's done all the hard work making this happen and getting the videos wrangled and all that. And Reagan Collier, our communications director for the College of Ag. Between her and Mike, she makes the technology and all that work for all of us. So big shout out to those three and everybody that was involved with this and all the people that made the video. So it made it really well. So this afternoon we have, we kind of made this section entomology and breeding and variety developments for the individuals that are going to be introduced shortly. We've kind of set the table all day long. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. The agronomists, the pathologists, and all the other people in the world kept throwing you guys under the bus to have all the answers and all the magic bullets. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce everybody and give them a second and right after that to talk. We have Dr. David Weaver down in Bozeman, Dr. Mike Giroux, Dr. Jamie Sherman, Dr. Phil Bruchner, and Dr. Jason Cook. And so Jason, let's start with you and just give a brief update and what you do and who you are.
So I work down at MSU Bozeman, and I work closely with the wheat breeding teams. My primary role is to assist in integrating new economically important traits into the spring and winter wheat breeding programs. And then I also do quite a bit of research focused on studying genetic resistance for things like wheat stem sawfly, looking at drought tolerance and other disease resistance genes, and aluminum tolerance is another one we've been working on lately. So yeah, so my primary role is working with the wheat teams and supporting the wheat breeding efforts.
Thank you, Jason. Let's go up to David.
Hi, I'm David Weaver. I'm an entomologist. Been working here since 1997. Primary focus is wheat stem sawfly. That's what we work on. We also do work on some other insects. We work on trying to assess as many different strategies as possible for control of wheat stem sawfly. That includes interacting a lot with the breeders, spring and winter wheat, and also barley, since we have a little more sawfly and barley now. Looking at cropping system impacts on wheat stem sawfly, and answering a lot of questions about how come I all of a sudden have wheat stem sawfly this year when I haven't had them for quite a few years.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Mike.
My name is Mike Giroux, and I'm the Durum wheat breeder and also the department head of the Department of Plant Sciences here in Bozeman. So some of our major focuses is on creating durum lines that have higher yield under dry land conditions in Montana. And we had our first release in January 2020.
Outstanding. Congratulations. Jamie.
I'm Jamie Sherman. I'm the barley breeder, and the barley program is working to improve both spring and winter barley for malt, food, forage, and feed production. Our newest release is Buzz, a low protein daughter of Hocket, which we think will benefit both growers and end users. It's currently being tested by several maltsters and brewers, and certified seeds should be available next year. Our next release in this coming year will hopefully be a forage line with improved biomass over forages that are currently being produced, barley forages that are being produced in Montana. But we've been able to increase biomass while maintaining grain yield, and we hope improving nutritional aspects as well. We're working on malt quality, disease resistance, and abiotic stress resistance, including drought, cold, especially in the winter program, and acid tolerance to acid soils.
Haver's not cold in the summer, so I'm glad you added that, Jamie. Thanks.
Well, sometimes you might get trouble with the spring early on.
I'm just teasing. Phil, let's go to you.
I am Phil Bruchner. I've been, I guess, living the dream for the last 28 years, and born in Montana and educated here at MSU Bozeman. And if I had any job that I could get, this would be the one that I would always wanted. And I've had a good time. Our latest releases, we have a comprehensive breeding program for winter wheat. And our latest releases are Bobcat, Flathead, and we licensed Stand-Clear CLP to Nutrien this past year. So look forward to visiting with you.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Not surprising, the first question is going to go to Dr. Weaver. The triangle's been inundated with sawfly. Hard to keep up. What are the pros and cons of swathing wheat and sawfly levels?
So what are the pros and cons of swathing really quickly? Obviously growers swath for a reason, not just to spend the money, and that is to make sure that they windrow the wheat, and that way they don't lose much of the wheat that it would be otherwise lodged if you have a severe sawfly infestation. Disadvantages to swathing may be that it has a negative impact depending on how high your swath cut is on natural enemies, parasitoids that attack the wheat stem sawfly.
Do you have any rough economics on it, David, or a threshold or any kind of normal like threshold potentials that you could add to that dialogue?
In terms of how much you should have before you start swathing? Yeah, I think there was some older work that we did where we said that if you had over 25% cut on the outside, probably need to swath a few times around. If you have more than that, probably need to swath your entire field, like around 40% or so.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, David. With that topic, bringing on the sawfly topic, I think I'll just go to each one of the breeders here and maybe start off with Phil. And you have any comments on where your program is on sawfly develop or sawfly prevention or resistance?
Well, I think really sawfly resistance and development of solid stem winter wheat cultivars has probably been our greatest contribution. And I have Jim Berg, that's kind of the right-hand part of the winter wheat breeding program. I guess that leaves me on the left side, but he works hard every year to document solidness at multiple locations over all our solid stem germplasm. So when we get lines into our sawfly yield trial, we're not worried about whether they have solid stem. We're looking at other traits like yield potential and also the direct effect of the sawfly on the cultivar, the cutting, how bad it's cut. And we have, tremendous variability even among the winter wheat lines with very high stem solidness in sawfly cutting. So just to document that phenotypically, and we base our selection on phenotypic stem solidness plus phenotypic resistance to wheat stem cutting. And then we're looking at other traits like quality and field performance. So that's why we've had an impact on sawfly and cultivar development.
Jason, anything in spring wheat you want to comment?
I mean, a lot of what Phil already said applies to spring wheat. What I would add is we've been doing quite a bit of research in collaboration with David's group, looking to identify new sawfly resistance genes and diverse germplasm found around the world. And we've had success in that, we've identified additional genes, pretty much all solid stem genes, but they're in different locations in the wheat genome. So we're bringing those in to both the spring wheat breeding program and the winter wheat breeding program to add more diversity for, to add potential for making even better solid stem wheat. And then also some of these genes might have some what we call linkage drag. So that means that when you pull these genes into your breeding program, they might also bring in some bad genes. So by adding a larger number of genes into our pool, hopefully we'll be able to cull some of those bad genes out and further improve the Sawfly resistant wheats.
Perfect. Thank you. Mike, anything in Durum about Sawfly you need to worry about?
Well, our initial crosses didn't have solid stem segregating. More recent ones have. So Durum has not traditionally been hampered as much by Sawfly, but we hope it is in the future. In that, we hope more Durum is grown. So we are working on that. So a lot of our crosses have varieties like Fortitude in them, which is a Canadian variety that has solid stems. So our first goal is to identify lines that have high yield under the correct conditions, and then they'll be scored for solid stem. And so, of course, we will be attempting to create lines that have solid stem. We must have them now. They're just not at that stage of testing yet.
Perfect. Jamie, David did mention barley's being impacted more and more. How does this impact your program?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that traditionally we think of barley as not being infested, even though it's hollow stemmed. And so we haven't really understood why that is. And the problem to look at it genetically is that we would need a barley that is impacted. And so now we've identified Hockett. He has a student that has done a survey of barley, and Hockett was one of the greatest impacted of the barley by the Sawfly. And we've actually got a cross between it and a line that's resistant. And we hope, we need to look for funding to fund it, but we hope that we'll be able to figure that out and identify whatever it is about barley that makes it resistant. And then that could be useful in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to toss the next question to Jason. Jason, probably I'm going to toss it to you simply because you talked about linkage and drag and some new modern techniques that you're investigating in. But a question earlier was to Kevin McPhee on how fast we can turn varieties. I mean, it was used to think it was 10 years between breeding and making it hit the streets, for lack of a better word. Can you talk about what you and maybe the other breeders are doing in layman's terms so the producers understand how fast or how you're able to turn varieties quicker this time of year than it was 10 years ago?
Yeah, so one technology Phil's using a lot in winter wheat is called a double haploid technology. And basically what it does is it allows you to skip the whole process of trying to get a variety to be, to breed pure, meaning that from one generation to the next, you basically have the same variety. It takes, 4 or 5 generations, well, at least 5 generations to get to that point. With the double haploid technology, I don't know, Phil, about year and a half, I guess, in winter wheat, somewhere in there, to get it to that pure breeding state.
Right. And then we figure it can save us 4 or 5 years we have a long breeding cycle, but we can save 4 or 5 years on priority material.
Yeah, so I think some people, maybe the quickest you can get a new variety out is 6 years versus, what would you say, Phil, 10, 11 years for you? Something like that for a conventional.
We're at least that long, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's another method out there called speed breeding. We haven't really implemented that one yet, but it's basically where you use a long photo period or long days, meaning the plants get around 22 hours of light a day and growing in certain conditions, and that can really increase the number of generations that you can get in a year. I'm not really sure, maybe 4 or 5 generations, whereas right now in spring wheat we can get 3 generations. So that's another method out there that people have been trying to increase the speed of the breeding pipeline. With that one, well, with both there's costs. So with speed breeding, you need to have dedicated people working on it because of the logistics of turning over this material pretty rapidly. So yeah, there's a lot of labor that would be involved with that. And then of course with the double haploid process, it's, I don't know, it's like $40 a line or something like that to get one double haploid. And so it's pretty expensive too. So there's technologies out there that can really increase the speed of the breeding pipeline. There's just a cost to it too.
Okay, thank you. Next question is Mike. What does it mean when they're talking about durum quality, and what does it mean to end product?
Well, there's a couple key traits. Number one is color. So this is really important in durum. It's really important in spring and winter wheat too. But in durum, there's not much else in pasta besides durum. So if the color of the seed is wrong, of the semolina after milling the seed is wrong, the pasta is not going to be pretty. So color is number one. Number two is protein content and strength to make a firm pasta. And then starch type. So we've been working quite a bit on starch type. So liking for lines that have increased amylose content, and we hope to have those out in a few years as well. Those will have a little bit lower glycemic index, which is great, because you digest the sugars more slowly, your blood sugar doesn't rise as fast. But the other key thing is that they're just better. They make a firmer pasta that resists overcooking. So the main things though are color and protein content and strength.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, this is a one from Sheridan County. The producer asked, can you add one more end product line to start breeding for into your program, please?
What do they want?
I don't know, but just make it, I think they're making a comment that you're breeding for one of everything. So extensive program. But
Well,
where are you?
The way that works is it's a shotgun approach. And if you throw enough stuff against the wall, something's going to stick.
Got it.
So
Got
it's
it,
just
but-
to try to be successful.
No, I understand. But then the next talk is you talked about a new forage barley that was going to be released. Can you expand a little bit on that and talk about what that line is and where we're at?
Sure. We're right now making breeder seed. So next year it would go to foundation seed, and then the next year then being certified seed. Why do we want to do it? Well, there's some good varieties out there, but we think that just like that we can always improve. And what we were working towards is, for example, Lavina has really good grain yield and good biomass. But what we've crossed Lavina with a line called Cowboy, which is quite a bit taller. And so we've increased the biomass. It's also a little bit slower to develop, which actually helps with the digestibility we found. And so we're hoping that it'll be easier to digest for the animals, which will increase nutritional value. So that's what's on the table as far as the forage coming up. A cross between Lavina and Cowboy. And we haven't named it yet. We want to make sure that we really want to release it before we go down that road.
Perfect.
And the forage aspect, what's coming up in the pipeline, there's some really interesting material that has even more biomass. So we've crossed and even more digestible. So we're just going to continue to try to improve on those quality aspects of the forage line. And then with our winter program, the thing that we have coming up next is a winter forage. That's going to be the first winter that we release. And those are almost twice as tall. So we're hoping that they'll have a lot more biomass. And so we're kind of excited about those. We also think it's kind of like a low risk winter release, if it got a lot of kill, and maybe the grower could still manage it. But anyway, that's sort of the idea.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie. David, a topic came up and they came back in again just now during the discussion. They were talking about cover crops, pollinators, and pollen, and how that may impact as an integrated pest management strategy to help moderate sawfly. Could you comment a little bit about that and where you are in that project?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I guess since we've started switching to not necessarily planting all of our wheat one year and then fallow the next, and started to incorporate other crops. We wanted to look and see what would happen if sawflies emerged in those types of crops. So basically, if you plant peas on a field that was badly cut by weed stem sawfly the previous year, it has an impact on sawflies, but not as much as you'd think. The sawflies come out into the peas, they freak out, they don't live very long, so they spend some time flying around. If there happens to be a volunteer weed in there, there'll be like 100 eggs inside it. They eventually find their way out and they hit the surrounding fields. And it looks like maybe there's a modulation, 10% of the egg load or so isn't likely to get to the stems because they're spending that time and they don't live very long. As far as cover crops in general, one of the things that's really important is I mentioned parasitoids in the swathing question. The parasitoids are natural enemies that kill the sawflies. And one of the things is that sawflies are native. It's been here a long time. Parasitoids are native. And when they were interacting on the prairie before wheat was here, there was access to a variety of things on the prairie, including flowers that produce nectar. Now, parasitoids are little small things, so they can't use all plants the same way. So they can't take nectar from peas at all, because if they did, that would be great. But the nectar supplements the parasitoids' lifespan. It makes it so they can live longer, and that means they'll lay more eggs. They produce eggs, so they're not like sawflies. They're not short-lived. So certain things in cover crops might be very beneficial for parasitoids, especially things that have what we call extrafloral nectar. So parasitoids have a lot of difficulty with certain types of blossoms, but a lot of species of plants produce nectar other places. Droplets of sugary nectar form, and parasitoids will drink them. And so we're focusing a lot on that to try and enhance parasitoids. I could say why that's so important is because ultimately the parasitoids and the solid stem together are what makes it so that a grower will see a decline in the sawfly numbers. Solid stems are the first avenue of defense, and then the parasitoids are very important. A lot of the places that are outbreaking now probably didn't have sawflies for a long time. The parasitoids need them to live on. They crash. Not all the sawflies are gone. Then the next thing that happens is they start doing better, and parasitoids have to catch up. So it's just a population dynamics issue. So all these things come together in sort of a big picture. Cropping is really important to try and manage sawfly. Right. Not just plant a solid stem, of course, and certainly not just swath.
Great. So typical lynx hair type of relationship, even in sawfly and parasitoids. Yep. Outstanding. Mike, you mentioned earlier your department head, so I'm assuming this question is directed at you. Can you update it on new hires and where you are in the hiring process for critical positions in plant sciences?
Sure. Well, where we're at is at the university right now is it has a hiring freeze, so we're not able to proceed. Spring wheat program, Luther Talbot retired at the end of 2019. So that's a very important position for us. And we requested approval to hire a research scientist. So Phil is the current interim spring wheat breeder. So somebody to help Phil manage that program going forward. So Phil could talk about that separately. We have a couple other positions though too. One being the endowed chair position, also really important to us, but also frozen at this time. The lab is still available. We're still ready to proceed as soon as we get the green light from MSU to do so. We have an extension pathology position that also is frozen. And again, we'll proceed as soon as we get the green light to do so. That may not happen this fall. I don't know if Darren, you have better insight than I do in terms of the timing, but we expect it may not be this fall, right? It depends what happens with budget situation this fall, but we'll proceed as soon as we possibly can. And Phil could comment on spring wheat, and I guess we're looking to fill that position.
I would just add, we do have our advertising and position description. It's a good position for new PhDs, except it has a lack of permanence and security that because when we do want to hire our tenure track faculty breeder, this person may not have a job again. So but we do have a good pool of candidates right now. I think maybe close to 30 now, and still another month to attract more candidates. We're looking for more good candidates, and we'll try to identify the best we can. This could be considered an audition for the permanent faculty position for some, and we're hoping that some will consider it in that light.
Perfect.
I would mention
The situation we're in is not unique either, so that's true nationwide, that positions have been frozen. So we're fortunate to continue, but as Phil pointed out, we will get a large number of applicants, probably because most positions like this are frozen nationwide. So Phil should have a large number of people on his committee, should have a large number of applicants to screen.
I would mention in terms of spring wheat breeding that we do have an excellent professional staff, Dr. Hua-Young Heo and long-term research associate Nancy Blake. Of course, Jason is assisting on that program, and all the steps are going to get done. We're going to advance germplasm, and but we need the artist to do the painting. We can do the brush strokes. We just need someone to lead that program, and we hope that'll come before too long.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. And just to supplement, it's not necessarily the university or Dr. Bajwa or anywhere up the chain. This is full border regions policy across all university policies. So this is something that with the pandemic that we're reacting to. And so it's not that there's lack of support for any one of these positions. It's there. They're just trying to make what's best decision right now with the pandemic. So, and Mike, I guess I'll rub my crystal ball. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. Jamie, to you, this question is probably a result of this morning's dialogue. We had a fairly robust discussion with Zach Miller about nutraceuticals and berries and nutraceuticals and other types of vegetable crops. You mentioned human consumption of barley. Is that kind of what you're working on in the barley industry, or what are you working for human consumption in barley?
Not pharmaceuticals.
Nutraceuticals.
Yeah. I guess I don't even know what that means, so I'm not working on it. But
all right.
But what I think you mean is that they would have high nutritional value, like you could maybe isolate beta-glucan out of it or something like that and use it as a food additive. So we're focusing on the food. So people may not know that, barley normally has a hull, which makes it pretty impossible for humans to eat. And so a lot of the barley that you buy in the grocery store to put in your soup has been pearled, which means that the seed coat has been smoothed off of it. Just like an apple, the best part of the apple, the highest level of nutrition is in the outer layers. It's the same with the seed coat. The seed coat has a lot of good nutrition in it. So you're losing some of that nutritional value by pearling off the seed coat. So but we can also buy or create something called hullless or naked barley. And that barley does not have a hull. And so you could actually eat it, leaving the seed coat on. And so that would increase nutritional value, a lot of fiber in that. Barley itself is very high in nutrition. It has a lot of protein. It also has a special soluble fiber called beta-glucan, which is very good for colon and heart health, and that's just naturally occurring. And then we also, so the white barleys are high in nutrition, and some markets, for example, Japan is interested in some white barleys to use as a food additive with rice to increase the nutritional value of rice. And so we're hoping that eventually we can get into that market. Locally in Montana, there's been a tradition that organic growers have been interested in growing food barley that is purple, and it has a high anthocyanin content. That's what makes it purple. And anthocyanins are antioxidants, which are good for us. It's a vitamin, but it also prevents cancer. So the purple barleys are there as well. So when we started, there were a lot of issues, or there are a lot of issues, at least in Montana, with the naked barley's not yielding. And there's issues with poor germination. If you're too rough with the harvest of those naked lines, you can hurt the embryo. And so we're working on that. And so I think it's a pretty easy thing. We've already got some lines in the pipeline that are much higher yielding and stronger. And so we're hoping that our next line after the forage will be a food line. And that's kind of, the nice thing about having all these different things that we're breeding for is it does increase our ability to release lines for the growers of Montana. Every year we can come out with a line that doesn't compete with what we released last year because it can have a different end use. So I think that that's a kind of an advantage for our program, that we have that more flexible ability. So anyway, that's that for the food.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. I'm not sure who to toss this one because I think I know what this person's asking, but I'll let you guys decide who this is. This producer was from Great Falls, or this person was from Great Falls, and said they were at a field day a few years ago and saw plants that looked to be wheat, not growing in rows, but scattered out way away from each other. And I think they're referring to hill plots. And what are they used for, and what benefit do they get by planting crops this way?
I'll take a stab at it, because I think probably a lot of the hill plots that you see are ones that are planted for wheat stem sawfly research. As I mentioned, sawfly was on the landscape a long time ago. It probably utilized bunch grasses. Planting hill plots, which basically is a small aliquot of seeds, like 10 seeds or so, in a spacing about 18 inches apart, allows us to create that form. It allows for the sawflies to forage and explore the various cultivars, to move among them and make decisions about whether or not they're going to lay eggs, and also gives high exposure to the sawflies so that potential cutting is also very likely. So that may be what they saw. It's the actual spacing of those, and that's what we would put for crosses. Like, let's say we're working with Jason or Phil on a new line, and we have a cross, and we want to look at the progeny from that cross to see how the resistance manifests in that cross. We can actually look at all those different members of that population in the field, and through some statistical wizardry, get an assessment of how well that particular cross worked and how well that allele performs for resistance. And ultimately, one thing that we keep saying, solid stem, what it does is it kills small sawflies when they start feeding. So it actually is a tool for management from that point of view. If it's really solid, females won't like to lay eggs in it. They have to jab their ovipositor in the stem. And if it's really solid, they don't like it as much. When solid stem gets really cut bad, it's population dynamics again, Darren. It's basically how many eggs get put inside a stem. And if there's enough in there, they'll eat each other, and they'll survive the pith and cut the stem. There's an oversimplification, but kind of how it works. So you have someone stationed that might not have been supposed to cut, but probably did get cut. It might be because of a lot of eggs in the stem, and they're eating each other, not eating the pith.
Sure. Outstanding. Thank you, David. I assumed that's what the producer was asking, so good answer. Phil, your new variety Bobcat, what's winter hardiness, and where are you recommending that planted in Montana?
Well, Bobcat is not tremendously winter hardy, but it's winter hardy enough for north central Montana. We haven't seen big issues with it. We do test in Williston and Sydney with all our winter wheat advanced material each year, so we get a good assessment of potential cold hardiness, and it wouldn't be considered a very hardy winter wheat line, but we think it's great. It has a good yield performance since 2015. We're on our 5th year of yield testing in north central Montana, and we think it's adequate for most normal environments in north central Montana in terms of survival. And looking forward to seeing it in commercial production, getting it out into more environments, I guess. I guess the great thing in terms, besides its stem solidness is resistant to sawfly cutting, is in north central Montana, particularly at Havre and Conrad, it has a lot higher yield potential than Warhorse, which is the current standard now for solid stem winter wheats.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. Mike, this question was in, might be response to your comments about a new Durum variety. I don't know if you had the name of it, and where should that be grown, or where should producers be adapting that in their rotations?
Well, as part of the variety release process, new varieties or lines are tested throughout the state. So we tested at the Southern Station, Eastern Station, Northern Station, Western Triangle, and the Central Stations. So throughout Montana, with the exception of the Northwest part of the state. So Durum, though, is primarily adapted and grown in Northeast Montana and North Central Montana. So those are the two locations that'd be recommended. It's currently MTD 16005, but we're proposing the name Luster, which is a small town in northeastern Montana.
Outstanding. Mike, maybe for people that don't know, maybe a quick explanation of the difference between Durum and other stuff, other wheats.
Well, Durum is quite a bit different in that it perhaps hasn't been selected as long, and also that it's a tetraploid. And common wheat, spring wheat, and winter wheat are hexaploids. So Durum has 2 copies of each gene, typically, for many genes. Hexaploid wheat, spring and winter, has 3 copies. So the quality traits are a bit different for the two. Spring and winter wheat are selected for bread quality. Durum selected for pasta quality, so some differences there. Some traits found in Durum that we'd like to have that are not there are fusarium resistance. So one we're interested in adding to Durum is fusarium head blight resistance. So if you look at our new variety, it's not resistant and to fusarium, and neither are any of the other current Durum varieties, but there is some resistance available in hexaploid wheat. So we're collaborating with somebody at North Dakota State University on lines he created by moving the resistance gene from hexaploid wheat into Durum, and we're making those crosses. So along those same lines, Jason also has funding to work on fusarium resistance. And our primary collaborator has been Frankie Crutcher. I know Jason is also collaborating with Ken Kephart of the Southern Station. So Frankie's at the Eastern Research Station. And when you mention hill plots, Frankie's also doing hill plots for fusarium resistance. So Frankie and Ken both have set up sprinkler stations so that we can do accurate selection for fusarium resistance among our new lines, both spring wheat, winter wheat, and Durum.
And barley.
And barley, sorry. I didn't look at those plots. I looked at all the other ones while I was there.
Good. This one in from Jordan. What comes first, breeding for yield or breeding for resistance?
To what? Resistance to what? I think it depends on what you're going for. So in the barley world, probably what comes first is especially malt barley having good quality. The producers and the end users will be okay if you have at least equal yield, but you got to have the quality. So that's why we instituted the malt quality lab, because we felt like we needed to select earlier for quality and not just select on yield early. But I think it depends on where you are. Like the growers that are having trouble with wheat stem sawfly, they would like the first thing to be wheat stem sawfly resistant. So
I would mention that, there are options for fungicides to help control foliar diseases, and some producers have higher management levels and the ability and willingness to invest in fungicides, so they're willing to tolerate more, say yellow rust or stripe rust susceptibility to in terms to get a higher yielding variety. So traditionally, we've always put disease and pest resistance very high in our list of priorities because our I guess report card is producers growing our varieties. We don't want just a select few growers growing our varieties. So ours are more broadly adapted to the pests that we have in Montana.
Anybody else want to take a whack at this open-ended question?
Well, despite the fact that I'd be a big advocate for resistance, I think that there is some ultimate agronomic truth. I grew up on a farm. You need yield too, for sure. You know, it's that trade-off. I think that's that. You know, from my perspective, it's got to be a balance, right, between the two. You know, it doesn't do much good to have resistance. It doesn't yield adequately. So it's something that's really been emphasized in the programs here is for sawfly resistance, at least, is to try to boost yield as well as resistance. I think that's true. If Phil disagrees, he could say, but I think I'm right on that.
Yeah, I think. Oh,
Go ahead,
yeah, I
Jason.
think yield and resistance definitely go hand in hand. One good example that we've worked with is there's a wheat streak mosaic virus resistance gene. It's been around for quite a while now, and we've been tested a lot, but unfortunately it causes a 10 to 15% yield reduction because it comes from a relative of wheat. And so it brings in a lot of deleterious genes that decreases yield. So Phil's worked a lot with it in winter wheat, and also Luther worked with it in spring wheat. And varieties were developed, but they were just never high enough yielding to warrant being put out for release because farmers just wouldn't grow them because the wheat streak wasn't present enough to warrant their use. So, but what we're doing now with wheat streak is there's some new genes that we're working with, and they don't seem to have that yield drag. So Phil's brought those into his winter wheat breeding program, and now we're bringing them into the spring wheat breeding program. So we're hoping to be able to get varieties that both have the yield and ability to resist wheat streak when it becomes a problem.
So I think I hear from all the answers that maybe the question is no one thing is more important than the other. You have to have yield, and that nobody really does single trait selection. It's multi-trait in our environment in Montana that you got to focus on a lot of different things when you're developing new varieties. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Good. David, this one's you, and we got about 7 minutes. So I'm going to go really quickly to David for maybe a quick question and answer, and then I'll go around to everybody in the room just to kind of as a wrap up to finish up the day with. But David, we had quite a bit of a debate this morning about cover crops, and then we went into annual forages and impacts of annual forages with nitrates and a large reduction in oats. And I'm asking this because you and I've talked about oats and cover crops and what impact they may have. And maybe you could describe that, why there's maybe an advantage to that in Montana, and maybe looking at that in some of our cover crops or other avenues.
Yeah. So real quick, oats is absolutely lethal to wheat stem sawflies. They use it just like wheat. They lay their eggs in it, but they die. I've not seen evidence of a cut oat stem, even under the most extreme experimental manipulations. You know, it just doesn't happen. So it's a great tool for managing sawflies if you can put oat in that cover crop, and that cover crop is plopped down on a problem. If there's a fair amount of oat in there, that's gonna add to killing the sawflies. You know, and that's a big advantage for sure. In fact, some people have said, growers have said that in the olden days when there was a lot more oats grown for horses, which predates me a little bit, but I think there probably was some impact of growing that specifically on the landscape, because it is an absolute dead end for the sawflies. They like it, they lay eggs in it, but they won't survive.
And you did some preliminary work on some of that in the cover crops and saw that they were being impacted. The oats were being implanted in.
Yeah, they definitely had a bunch of eggs in them for sure. In some of the ones on your station, for example, for sure.
Yep. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for being here today. I'm going to go around the room. We got about 5 minutes. Mike, you have any wrapping up comments or any thoughts you have?
Well, the biggest wrap up is that we enjoy working on Durum, trying to create new varieties and collaborating with the research centers in doing so. And one exciting thing that I didn't mention so far is that we have been having success at creating lines that are intermediate in height between semi-dwarf and full height that should have enhanced yield. And so those also should be coming in a few years.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Jamie.
Well, I'd just like to thank the research centers for all of their good work and the data that they get to us. It's integral to our success. We need those data points to be able to release lines in a timely fashion. When you were talking about speed breeding, getting that data from around the state is integral to that. And then also the growers and the support from the checkoff dollars through the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee we can't survive without it. It makes all the programs go, and we just recognize that, and we would always welcome suggestions or comments. Our best ideas come from the growers of Montana, what we need to be working on. So I know we didn't get to talk to you directly, but please seek us out on our web page at Montana State, and then we're also on Facebook and Instagram. So please check us out, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Jamie. Jason.
Mute myself. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for listening in, and thanks for our supporters, especially the checkoff dollars and from Montana Wheat and Barley Committee. And we're definitely listening. So if there's issues that are popping up out in our wheat growing regions, let us know. A few years ago, people started spotting an aluminum problem, and so we jumped on that, and we've been doing a lot of screening of our winter and spring wheat materials for aluminum tolerance, and we have lines that are tolerant to it. So we have germplasm and hopefully genetic tools to solve the problem. So just keep us posted on what's going on, and we'll try to help solve those problems.
Good point, Jason. And we talked about acidic soils, which is driving that aluminum toxicity this morning with Clayne Jones. So outstanding job on that. David.
Yeah, just same thing. Thanks for all the funding support. We also thank the growers that allow us to do research on their wheat stem sawfly problems. We for sure have some ideas sometimes that we need to try, and we can't small scale it with the wheat stem sawfly. So I appreciate those people over the years that have helped us with that. And of course, that's been a partnership that has been fostered through the research centers as well. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you, David. Phil.
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of echo what everybody else has already said. Of course, there's a lot of people that help us out, and of course, checkoff funding, Wheat and Barley Committee, through the Wheat and Barley Committee, our collaborators on the research centers, and producers whose farms we're on. Some of them don't even like to see us coming because they know we're coming because there's a problem there, but that's what it takes to work through the problem. And we're working for you, the producers of Montana. So our objective is to develop kind of cultivars that you need on your operations, and not all the same. We're going to develop things that work better for some people than others, but that's part of the plan, that we want some diverse cultivar options. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I want to thank our panelists today. And one thing I'll mention is, as department head of the research centers, I can't tell you how proud I am, and Mike could probably echo this as department head of plant sciences, is how proud I am of all the faculty interactions and collaborative work we have throughout the state of Montana. We can't do what we do at the research centers without the people in Bozeman. I think the feeling's the same way with the people in Bozeman at the research centers and that. And I kind of find it funny that in my 27-year career at Montana State University, we've been doing large multidisciplinary collaborative work since we started. And now it seems to be the trend in most granting agencies and federal agencies that they're finally catching up to us on the frontier in that. And for the producers of Montana, that's really what it means to me, is that there's everybody pushing on the same side of the rock to make sure we're passing that research information to you, so you can pass that farm and ranch on to the next generation and stay profitable. And so I know David's audio was in and out a little bit today. So if you have any questions for David, his email is listed as a contact source on our field day program, or you can Google him at montana.edu, as well as all the other people. So if you missed maybe some of his conversation and need a follow-up, please don't hesitate to address each and every one of you. Once again, I want to thank Montana PBS, Mike Suarez, Sharon Henderson, and Reagan Collier to make this happen. We did get a ping for our camp panelists all day long from Dr. Bajwa, the Vice President of Agriculture, complimenting and thanking everybody who took the time to make those 60 plus videos we have out there for educational opportunities for the producers, and all the panelists that took time out of their day during harvest and during a critical time of the year to make this virtual field day happen. And I got to say, just personally, thanks so much for all your hard work and what you do for Montana producers. And so with that, we'll close our last section and thank our finalist panelists and wish them the best. Have a happy, safe harvest. Make sure weaning goes well. And hopefully we'll have a light winter, and we'll recover from the 2020 brought to you by the Acme Foundation and the Wile E. Coyote Enterprises into 2021. So good luck. Thanks everybody for showing up today.